All right, how's it going, everybody? We're back again. This week we've got Professor Dan Boner with us, gonna offer some infinite wisdom and talk about a lot of topics that we've kind of been chatting about here before we got started. So things that we feel like will just help the music community and maybe shed some light on topics as people are trying to grow and just get better and feed their passion. So Dan, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I've been playing music since I can remember. I grew up in church playing gospel music, southern like country gospel and bluegrass, and touring with a gospel group when I was 11 years old, and with David Reed, who is Ola Belle Reed, the great songwriter, her son David, and did that. And then when it came time to go to college, I heard about a place called East Tennessee State University, where they had this bluegrass and country music program, and I applied and got my music education degree here while I also was active in the bluegrass old time and roots music program. And if you stay someplace long enough, eventually they put you in charge, and that's the short story of it.
Cool. Well, awesome. Well, you really don't need an introduction. I feel like your reputation precedes you. Everybody, especially in the East Tennessee area, and even living in Kentucky, your name was thrown around about how successful ETSU's program is and the students that come through there, the things they're able to accomplish, and it's really set up for success. The West is a bit of a product of that.
Yeah, Wes and I we traveled all over the place. We went on a couple bluegrass cruises too.
A couple of them, and, I was Dan's right-hand man in the van, probably guided him the wrong way a couple times, but that's alright.
No, no, Wes was a good shotgun. We basically the way it went was whoever had seniority in the band, they had the option they could ride shotgun if they wanted.
That's fair.
And so Wes was always up there because he was in the band so long. Yeah, we Lynette Seaton really loved you a lot. One of our big donors from Jacksonville, Florida,
Love Lynette, miss her dearly.
and yeah, we the last big tour we did was out to California. We did one of Danny Stewart's bluegrass cruises. Went down to Mexico, and that was in last week of February 2020. And we were
Yep,
hearing about this virus coming in, and like the boat
yep.
next to us was quarantined, and we got back in time. We went to San Francisco, played there. Anissa Burnett of the Burnett Sisters was with us, and Josiah Nelson of Mountain Grass Unit was with us. Wasn't he with us on that tour? I think
Yeah, yeah, Josiah and then Adam,
Adam Miller,
and
who's in the Lonesome River Band,
yeah,
Pretty stout
yeah,
group.
it was fun, yeah.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
and
And then
then
we almost didn't make it back to Kingsport because we didn't know if we were gonna have to stay in San Francisco or not.
I know it was, and the plane ride back, the last leg of it, wherever it was from, flying back into Tri Cities. You remember there was somebody. It was somebody. A doctor had been stuck on in China or something, and
Yeah,
his wife were coming back, and the news was there. It was a big thing because they had been quarantined, and
right.
they asked if he was on our plane. He said, "No, it's the next plane." So we just went on home, and then like 2 weeks later, everything changed. But we got
Yeah.
out of California as quick as we could.
We did. I thought that news outlet was there for us. I mean, I was ready. I mean, I
Welcome
was
home.
I was like tired, but I was like, like, hello, hey
Yeah.
everybody. You know.
But you put on your Wes Wolf smile, and
I did. It was a half asleep smile at 1 o'clock in the morning, but it was there.
Seems to get him a lot of places.
Yeah. Yeah, it
So,
does.
I guess talking about all those people that have kind of went on to these really, really successful bands, we were chatting a minute ago about some of our topics, and we wanted to pick Dan's brain about, what's this dividing line of graduating from an amateur musician to becoming, considered professional on a broad scale. Dan, you're in a unique situation to see applicants, students, graduates, and then, these really long, successful careers. From what you've seen with your tours and the bands you've played with, like, how do aspiring musicians get to what we would consider like a professional level?
I would say persistence. Um, being a professional musician a lot of times is not very easy. It's not consistent. There are very few gigs where you're on salary and you can kind of expect a certain lifestyle. For a lot of bluegrass musicians and country musicians, Americana musicians, there's a lot of travel, there's a lot of self-sustaining, there's especially at the beginning, a lot of people are trying to be their own booking agent and their own publicist and their own recording artist, and they're trying to do everything DIY.
Yeah.
And that can wear you out real quick because it's a lot of work, and especially at first it can feel like not a lot of gain,
Hmm.
and it doesn't translate always to financial success on the front end. You could go into the bluegrass world and think, well, all I've got to do is win the IBMA audience, win a few IBMA awards, and I'm going to be set. And you'll still have to work hard,
Yeah.
And the thing about being a professional musician, there are many different ways to do it. I think that's important to realize that we think about being the professional touring artist, a performing artist, where you're on stage all the time. But that's one way to make a living in music, to make your life in music. And it can also be that maybe you don't quit your full-time job. Maybe you have a job that is flexible enough to where that you can still perform on weekends and in the summer. There's a picture back here of Tom Gray, who played with the Country Gentlemen and the Seldom Seen. And Tom was here. He's been here several times to talk to students. I remember the last time he was here, he said that, I was a full-time employee for National Geographic in Maryland. He was a cartographer. And if I remember correctly, at one point, one of his jobs was to compare riverways and waterways with the maps that they were publishing and making sure that what was in the map was actually true to what he was visualizing. And so he would kayak down rivers and things like that. I think I've got that right. But he said, don't feel inadequate if you have a full-time job and you play bluegrass music. Like, lots of people do that. And we can all be, involved in music in some way. And if we are able to supplement our income, that's really good. And then if eventually enough people really like what you do, that it starts tipping the scale and you say, well, I've got something here that I can maybe go to a part-time job and then have the music career start to build. That could be a situation. Lots of people teach. Gosh, the majority of professional musicians I know in bluegrass teach. A lot of them teach camps. Some of them teach private instruction. Some of them teach group instruction. There's these jam programs that are all across Appalachia right now that people are working in. You might own a music store. You might get into songwriting and you might not hit the road. You might be one of these people who sits back and writes and creates and gives it to other people. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of different ways to do it, but persistence is really the thing. The
Absolutely.
ones who, at least for the ones who persist are the ones that seem to do better.
Yeah. We talk about that a lot in the hand therapy world too. And this is maybe just like a small take on that, but as a hand therapist, like you kind of are your own business, if that makes sense. Like anything that's going well is because you're making it go well, and like you said, the persistence of you're kind of treating yourself and making sure that like all these small avenues that you're tending to each thing, like you were talking about with like early on, being your own publicist, making sure that you're advertising yourself, you're booking gigs, and then, hopefully eventually you can kind of delegate some of that stuff. Yeah, really, really great insight. Very cool.
Yeah. And then once you get over, the first few years, then you're gonna do better if you can get a good booking agent, because they're going to have networks and relationships with venues that you
Hmm.
won't have. And
Yeah.
if you can get on a booking agent's roster, they're going to be able to book you at places when they're talking to these promoters. Publicist, a good publicist, they're not cheap, but they can help you to get interviews and get on television shows or podcasts and things that you might not get on your own because they'll have a relationship.
Wes, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of I agree with that. With there was a time whenever I was just starting out playing with Dave Atkins and Republic Steel and stuff like that, and we were at the bottom, and there was a lot of times that we were Supper Break. That was the name of our band, Supper Break. Because you would go out to these festivals or whatever you were playing, and you would just play the 5 to 6 slot for supper break, while everybody was taking just their supper break. And it was a very humbling experience because you didn't get paid for it, and then you took your own money and your own time, and you drove to, wherever in the middle of the woods to play this festival, and you had no cell service, and you're like, "Well, I don't know if I'm gonna get back home or not, and I have no money." At least I'm getting fed. And then, you do that for a couple of years, and then, you start getting paid. So yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Something we talked about in this first episode of this thing is like knowing your own definition of success. I think a lot of people want to think of success as like Morgan Wallen is successful, but he is like what he does in his show is like such a small percentage of what's possible. And, I think Wes and I were talking about too, like I feel successful in what I'm doing. I don't think it's on a grand scale, but I have a full-time job. I get to do music as much as I want to. I don't feel like it interferes enough to make me like, I don't really want to play this weekend. I've been doing it too much. And so I feel like personally I've found success with what I'm able to do with music. And I think kind of like personally looking inwards and trying to find that for yourself, I feel like will help you have a lot of affirmation as you're going through some of those hard times, like, do I want to be Morgan Wallen or do I want to be an important member of said band? Morgan Wallen is just an example that comes to mind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look back to all of our heroes. I mean, Bob and Sonny Osborne, they used to drive taxi cabs when they lived in Dayton. J.D. Crowe used to deliver the mail. Paul Williams did the same thing. And so, we don't tend to think about that aspect of their lives. We think about how they played and the albums they made that impacted us. But they were, they were making a living as well, playing professionally or playing part-time until it eventually got to the point where there was enough demand for them to go ahead and do it on a greater scale.
Yeah. That's good. I never thought about that either, especially your heroes. Like, I just figured that they just came out of the womb, were famous and excellent, and that was it. That's what they do.
And
yeah.
well, another thing, Avery, is that in this, when you're talking about something like music, there's a lot of things that you don't have control over. I think I heard Bill Evans say one time, there are doors that you can't open yourself, that someone else has to open for you.
Yeah.
Being here at ETSU, doing what I do full time every day of the week, this door, I did a lot of preparation. I got my education, did a lot of School of Hard Knocks stuff. But ultimately, it was someone else or a few other people that opened the door for me. Raymond McLean, Jack Tottle, Roberta Herron, Gordon Anderson, who was our dean at the time. And they provided an opportunity for someone like me at the right moment for me.
Yeah.
If it would have been a couple years later, a couple years sooner, it may not have happened this way. I might be doing something else, but it just happened to be that way. Wes isn't playing a lot of music right now, but who knows? Maybe in the next 6 months, somebody will need a guitar player who can sling like what Wes does. And before you know it, he'll be back out playing with somebody. You never know.
Yeah. 100%.
I would love to do that. Would you think that ETSU, like you said, for, opening doors, would you think that ETSU, which I think, but, would it be of what they say, getting your foot in the door, because there's a lot of great musicians that come out of ETSU, Jacob Metz, Josiah Nelson, all these guys. And, they go to ETSU, then they get noticed. Everybody knows a good musician that goes to ETSU. Would you think that that's, getting your foot in the door, getting into ETSU, and then after that, that's that door being opened up for you?
Well, it's a good place to network.
Yeah.
Some have even gotten married here.
Yeah.
They meet and they get married. Like Gracie Grossman and Joe Henson of the band Pythagoras. They met here at ETSU and now they're married, and both of them are getting ready to graduate. So it's a really good networking place, but it's also, hopefully if you go to ETSU, you're getting, a general education. Hopefully you'll be a better writer. You'll take some philosophy classes, some science classes. You'll do all of the things that somebody who gets a college education does, which will give you some options later, hopefully. The networking it's there. We get called all the time from people and texted all the time. I got 2 days ago, somebody was like, "Hey, Dan, I need a bass player for next weekend. We're playing 3 big shows in Nashville and I can't find anybody. Like, who you got?" So well, I recommended 1 current student and 2 graduates because, there's 3 people there. Like, I'm still trying to help people who have already graduated to, keep that network going. And, bluegrass is such a close-knit group, and old-time music and traditional country, and, we all try to help each other out when we can.
Yeah, it seems like everybody knows everybody. It's just it's a close family.
Feels that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess kind of getting into our next topic, Dan, you do a lot of custom electronics work. And we got some examples here at the ready. Oh, there she is.
There's the plug.
I want to hear all about this because I've been seeing it, and I've been one of the fortunate ones. I've got a deluxe reverb back here that has been gone over by Dan, and it's such a treat to get to use because it's bulletproof, and I love it. So, tell us about your vacuum tube preamp.
Well, this all started probably 15 or more years ago. I was wanting to record with high quality equipment, and I wanted my own stuff, and I didn't want to pay top dollar for it.
Yes.
And so I started by building a couple of those Cappy preamps. They're like an API clone.
Mm-hmm.
And I assembled that, learned how to do that. And then the next thing I wanted to build was an LA2A compressor. That's all hand wire point to point. I did that and it worked, and built a few other things. And then about 10 years ago, I guess, I thought, I don't have a vacuum tube mic preamp, and I do a lot of vocals. I'd like to have a good vocal preamp. So started going down that rabbit hole and copying some other designs that were out there, and spent a few years working on that, sold a few of those. And then I was like, this doesn't really sound exactly the way I want it to sound. So I totally redid it, and I started going from what I had learned and then trying to do my own thing. I didn't want to just make something somebody else already did.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these designs, like a cathode follower or these classic designs, they were designed in the 1930s and 40s, but they have been improved on through the years. And so I took some components that hadn't been maybe assembled in the same way and started designing stuff like that. And then every little component in these boards, I don't have one with me right here, but actually I do. I started, let me get one out here. So I started learning how to design circuit boards.
Yeah.
And so I was hand wiring stuff, but then I learned that I could make something that was even better on a custom circuit board. And every component on that board does something to the sound. And so I had learned enough to get to tweak it and say, well, I want it to sound this way. The top end isn't extended enough for me. How can I get that to do what I want? And then I would make adjustments and listen and bug Ben Bateson and other people. How's that sound? What do you think?
Yeah.
And force people to listen to different transformers. And I finally happened upon a design that I was really happy with, and that is now the vacuum tube microphone preamp and EQ. It's a 3-band EQ. It can be run at line level as well. So you can take a strong signal and run through it and just use the EQ and warm it up with the vacuum tube sound. You can use it as a mic preamp. It has phantom power on it, so you could run, condenser mic. And they sound great with ribbon microphones. They really, really will make a ribbon mic sound like what they were intended to sound like, because ribbon mics were from the days of vacuum tube technology. And what a ribbon mic wants to see is a transformer with a vacuum tube right after it with no loading on the secondary. And when you show it that, the ribbon mic just loves it, and it sounds way better than through solid state.
Yeah. Josiah played on a project of mine last fall, and he was on the road and doing some remote session work for me. And I was like, I was done with the album and was doing something else, and I ended up messaging him. Was like, "Hey, how do you keep that bow noise off of your recordings when you send them to me? Like, it is so good." And he had told me he had a microphone from you, Dan, like a kit, and I forget which one it was, but he was.
Bumblebee Pro.
Yes, that's it. And was
Artur
using it.
Fisher in Latvia makes those,
Okay.
and they're on sale right now, I think.
Even better. And I love that sound he was sending me. I was like, oh man, how's he getting it? Because I couldn't get it at home, and I digress. It was really good, and he kind of talked me through how he was positioning it. But that makes sense. You're using the vacuum tube with the ribbon, to get a really, really sweet sound.
Well, I like making stuff. I think, when my brain and my hands work in tandem, that's a good day for me.
Yeah.
Wes, you're a tinkerer. You work on cars and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's, my dad was a machinist. He retired now, but so I've always liked things. I like microphones. Like, you look at those old pictures and films of our heroes in front of some big old microphone, and they sound so good, and you want to sound like that too.
Yeah.
So many times the cheap stuff just doesn't sound the same.
No. Tell me about some of your inspirations, like sonically, for your preamp. Were there things you were listening to that really drove what you were building, or did you kind of just trust your ear?
It's a combination of measurement and using my ear. Like, I could probably show you a screenshot of this, but I'll just, these are all frequency sweeps,
Okay.
that shows you what the EQ actually is doing.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see that the extension, the frequency response, it's all right there. It goes way out to 85 kilohertz. That's way above the threshold of hearing.
Yeah.
But it affects the high frequencies that you can hear.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found that what I liked was a very high frequency response that went way on out, past 40, 50, 60 kilohertz. And what that does is it makes the speed of a mandolin or a banjo or guitar, the transient response, it makes it sound clear and crisp. So often when we're recording acoustic music, you want preamplifiers that are fast, that have good transient, good slew rate. But then at the same time, I wanted the open loop gain of a vacuum tube that provides a little nonlinearity and gives a little bit of second harmonic distortion. And that second harmonic distortion just warms things up a little bit. It makes it sound a little bit bigger than life. So whereas some vintage designs, they roll off too soon, you get a lot of heft, but not a lot of clarity or not a lot of sparkle. This preamp will give you both the sparkle and the nice guts down below. And then in stereo, when you put that on a master bus, they've got one at Compass Records right now. And I know that Matt Combs, the engineer, he likes to put it on the master bus on a final mix, and it's like it just widens it a little bit. It widens it and makes it sound a little deeper. And it's the transformers, it's the nonlinearity of the vacuum tubes and the circuit that just make it sound really special. I'm really happy with how it turned out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the videos I've seen you post in the past of even in the prototype stages and everything, it's always been so good. Exactly that sound you're describing is something that I try to do even with like digital plugins and DAWs, and sometimes it's so hard to get the depth and make these sounds wide and big like you're describing, and without either muddying it up or distorting some other part of your like EQ band, and you end up, it's like really hard to do well. And it's incredible that you've made your hardware version, it sound like you perfected it for what you're kind of pursuing.
And I paid attention to how the output drives, and so if you're about to clip your DAW, your digital converter, if you're almost ready to clip it at like plus 18, plus 20, right in that ballpark, the preamp is giving about 1% harmonic distortion at 1K. So it's like right at, like I know right where the amount of distortion is in that whole signal flow, and I wanted to make it user friendly. I didn't want to too much for the user to mess up. I also have it's actually being shipped. It's in the air right now from the Metalwork company that I use in China. It is a channel strip. It's a preamplifier, opto compressor, and 3-band EQ, just like that.
Uh-huh.
And that compressor, right now there's a prototype of it. It sounds really good. It's
Yeah.
LA2A-ish, but the LA2A has a lot of flaws in the way it was designed. So I did away with the flaws and made it the way I wanted it.
Yeah.
But the character of how it compresses is very similar to that classic compressor.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said, especially, and you said something earlier about you wanted these nice things, but purchasing them, isn't always on the table, and just kind of making something nice, if you want to have something nice, kind of make it that way. I think, I've done that with instruments and just anything I can tinker with, I feel like, especially as musicians coming up, like not to be afraid of trying something, especially like setup wise on your guitar, if you.
And then you learn how much more you can spend.
Exactly.
You buy
Literally.
the tools and you buy this, and before you know it, you spent 10 times more than what you could have just bought.
I have been recently talking myself up to doing a fret job on one of my guitars.
Hey, cool.
Well, it sounds like fun. You look at some frets, even up to the stainless or the Evo frets or just standard nickel. You're like, oh, the frets aren't that bad. And it's like, well, you need your Z file, you need your press. And if you really want to press them in there right, you need to, it's deep and wide. And the more I read about doing it well, maybe I just need a mallet and a pair of clippers.
Well, you go down the rabbit hole with all these things. And, I've thought a lot about, like, what is the most important thing when you're recording music? And I can't think of one most important thing. It's all important. Like, obviously, if the music isn't good to begin with, or doesn't, I wouldn't even say good, but if the music doesn't have some sort of, if it doesn't resonate with somebody, or if it's not some sort of artistic expression that people will find value in, it doesn't matter what you put in front of the instrument or the singer. But if you've got a good singer and a good instrument or instruments, or a bad or a cheaper instrument that's performed in a cool way, and then you find the room to put it in, and you treat the room, and you start there. I mean, people, you all have spent untold amounts of money on what kind of strings do you want on your guitar? Do you want 80/20? Do you want phosphor, nickel? What brand? What wind? And then you've all got your blue chip picks or your tone slabs. Like, well, which thickness do I want? And how's my angle? And have a bevel, and you change your hand position. If you're a singer, you work on pronunciation and tone production. And then you sit in a room and you stick a mic in front of you and dare to sing into it.
Yeah. It's so deep and wide. And, Wes and I talk about this all the time, but like, picks and strings, and it's a lot.
It's a wide
consider.
variety. I mean, like you were saying, Dan, you can put the best microphone in front of somebody, but if that person doesn't know how to use the microphone or use the instrument the way that it's meant to be and get the sound out of it that is supposed to be there, then it's not going to sound correctly anyways.
Yeah, or a banjo player comes in and they want to go for a Scruggs sound or a Crow sound, but the head is too loose, and so you have a discussion and say, well, what would you think about tightening the head a little bit to make it pop a little more?
Right.
In the studio, you think about that stuff. Or a lot of times you get in the studio and somebody isn't aware of how their instrument intonates, and it might be that in the key of G it's in perfect tune, and they go to C and it's way out. And it's because their instrument might have fret issues, or some sort of, somewhere along the measurement things aren't working right. And in the studio, it then becomes something to think about. Maybe you want it to be out of tune a little bit. Maybe it gives it that edge,
Yeah.
And that's the sound you're going for. But you also might want it to be pretty well in tune for a lot of things that you do.
Yeah, mostly in tune, maybe a little bit,
I think I was talking to a songwriter the other day here in town, and we were talking about a specific genre of music, and I was like, well, there's kind of no rules, but there's also an infinite amount of rules, and you've got to try to find the way to walk along that line and see what you're willing to compromise on. And like you said, I mean, man, I know I've played with some guys, even in Kentucky, that a friend of mine, Logan Halstead, incredible singer, incredible like writer, and I spent a lot of time on getting my gear lined out. Something I enjoy. Does it make a difference in how I play? Maybe not. But I enjoy like getting, my guitar set up well, the strings I know, my blue chip picks, my tortoise shell pick. I want to make sure that everything's right. And then Logan gets out his guitar. He hasn't changed the strings on it in probably 2 years, and he just tears my heart out singing and playing, and it's amazing. And I'm just like, what's all? Am I spending too much time on these little details? But like you said, like creating this product that comes across really well and makes people feel something.
Well, we're all different, and everybody has a different way of doing it.
Yeah.
We all have different personality. That's what makes our music all sound different, and that's
Yeah.
what made Earl Scruggs sound different from Bon Jovi.
I don't hear the difference at all.
No, they're very much the same,
There is no difference. No.
especially after 1969. No, talking about studio stuff, when here recently, I just have been helping Blue Highway. They recorded a few singles and I engineered them. And, it's not my job to get in the middle of Blue Highway and tell them very much at all,
Yeah.
in the studio, because they've been doing this for so long. But, but still being able to tell them, well, somebody's out of tune. Let's get that fixed, or because I know they're going to want it to be in tune.
Yeah.
That's part of their sound. Like trying to give them the best experience they can have in the studio to where they can make good music. I've also worked recently with Greg Blake. I've worked with him a few times through the years. He's, IBMA Male Vocalist of the Year, and he's nominated right now currently. Totally different experience working with Greg. He kind of says, you put the musicians together and we'll go in and cut it. So I'll get the musicians for that.
Yeah.
We produce it harder. We come in and arrange right from the start.
Mhm.
So, it's these types of, I like that diversity. I like some days I'm a spontaneous person. Some days I like every little aspect of here at the university, what students are working on. And Wes, you sat with me right here in this room in the circle and arranging songs out of nothing. Somebody comes in with a song lyric and they don't even know what chords they want yet. And
Yeah.
then collectively we work together on, making a out of it.
Yeah, that goes back to diversity. I want to, say something about that. That was one thing that if I could ever take away from my time at ETSU, and it would have to be me sitting in Nick's listening to Barry Bell's talk about how his playing in diversity. And he said, I didn't always, I don't always stick to bluegrass. He said, I play all kinds of different music, and that's what makes him who he is. And I think that, a lot of people need to get into is more diversity in music, or, in producing or whatever else, because it makes them who they are. It's just not, they just don't stick to one thing, and they can open their eyes to different things that they are learning and put it towards what they're doing.
Yeah, it always kind of tears my heart out a little bit, Wes, when I open up one of your stories and you're playing something John Mayer-ish. My God, this guy can crush some bluegrass guitar, and then now you're doing something, voicing something entirely like stylistically different. Maybe I should stop playing G runs and try to learn something different.
I got my degree in vocal music education. I was singing 20-tone chords, Penderecki and Bach, and
Yeah.
I got to learn the value of some of the great classical, vocal compositions of the last 400 years. And I don't do that now, but it certainly led me to appreciate it. And then, just learning more about other types of music and how people have thought about music over time, it informs what you do. I mean, Earl Scruggs, Don Reno, those guys were listening to jazz. Look how many jazz tunes ended up being banjo tunes.
Yeah.
Limehouse Blues and Farewell Blues and all these jazz standards. Lester Flatt, he was listening to like Frank Sinatra and people like that. So
Yeah.
they were influenced by other things than just what was in their community around them.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever tried to learn something outside of those genres that I'm comfortable with and got done with it and have felt like it was a waste of time. Almost every single time I'll try to jump down a different rabbit hole. I'm like, oh, well, I could play that lick in, whatever song, East Tennessee Blues, like, oh, this lick kind of works, this jazz C lick that I've learned, I'll throw it in there, and I can also use it in something else too to try to diversitize the repertoire of everything I'm trying to work into a song. But yeah, very cool.
What else you want to talk about? You said there would be all kinds of controversy and like hard questions.
Lord, we better not. We Wes had some pretty good ideas, but I think we're going to wait to get canceled for a few more episodes. Somebody
Name
said
one. Name one. I ain't scared.
We were talking about Tony Rice's endless deficits and all of those, shortcomings as a guitarist. But we wanted to get. Yeah, if you want to dig into that.
There's been a lot of discussions me and Dan have had on sleepless nights in a van, and we would definitely get canceled on this podcast. With
because we didn't like Tony. We thought Tony Rice didn't play well or something.
Yeah, it was all like bashing Tony Rice and how he was terrible.
I don't remember ever doing that. You have a different memory than I.
No, I think I think the purpose of this stuff is definitely. It sounds like even Dan, what you're talking about with being in the studio, like practicing humility as a musician and just humbleness, especially like we were talking about giving feedback in the studios and kind of knowing where to do it and knowing your role even as a musician to be receptive of those things and kind of know what to give and when to give it, especially if you're on the engineering producing side.
Well, I tell you what, if you're talking about what can help musicians, when so many musicians, when they start out and they're passionate, they want to feel like it's their job to give input to everyone else. When you're at a place like ETSU, the really cool thing that happens is you've got people giving you feedback. You're paying to get feedback.
Yeah.
Once you get out in the real world, it's not as welcome to start telling people how they should play and how they should do. And
absolutely,
you just kind of expect it. If I'm going to hire Wes now, I'm going to hire him because I know what he does.
Yeah.
And I want that aspect to whatever it is I'm doing, whether it's a recording or a show or whatever. And then, Wes needs certain things when he's playing, if he's using in-ear monitors, but it's not Wes's job to necessarily run the front of house sound.
Absolutely.
It might not be Wes's job to tell the recording engineer how to do his job or her job. And so I think being chill, going with the flow, that's a nice aspect. And also paying attention to what people seem to want from you. And sometimes people don't want you to give your opinion on everything. And then sometimes they do. Everybody works differently. So, I've worked in situations where the band leader said, and you play their stuff the way they want it, but you listen to the record and play it like that, get on stage, don't say much, and you're going to be fine. And that's a job. There are other people that I've worked with that even if they are a band leader, they want your input, and it's a little more democratic, and that can be a fun scenario as well. So I used to joke with Becky. I'd say, just point me to the stage and tell me when to be there. I'd make enough decisions all week. I don't want to make any more. Tell me where to be, when. But in reality, she is one to always ask everybody what they want. What do you think about this? Would you like to try that? And that's nice to have some input.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely got a lot of input from Dan, especially being in the Pride band. You come in and some people, like including me and myself, I thought I was good, and I'm not terrible. But then you come into the Pride band, and you sit in front of Dan, and he just tells you how it is, and that's what I like about Dan. He doesn't sugarcoat it. And that's one reason why I'm the way that I am now is, you got to listen. And if you don't listen, you're not going to progress in what you're doing.
Well, I wasn't mean to you, I don't think.
I cried many times. No, I'm just kidding.
I know you did have a little bitty tear in the corner. Well, Wes, you always had, real good sensibility about what songs needed, and you're a good team player. You also, from a band member's perspective, you also helped me to remember things that maybe I wasn't seeing. Paying attention to other stuff, you might bring to my attention something that I wasn't seeing or noticing, whether it was something another band member may have needed or whatever it might have been, or even musical stuff. You might have been hearing something that was passing by me every time, but you were always a good band member to have in the group.
Yeah.
You didn't like to talk on stage very much, though.
No, then I didn't. I would probably, looking back at it, I don't know why I was so shy. I don't get it. But now he probably couldn't get me to shut up. To be honest with you, I guess that just comes with age and wisdom.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I'm getting
Dan,
old.
with the bands you've worked with, you said something a minute ago about like having a really strong leader in a band versus like more of a democratic approach. Of those approaches with the bands that you've been around, which one do you feel like has had more success and longevity?
The success and longevity, they could be two different things. I mean, Blue Highway's a democratic band. They've been together now 30 years.
Yeah.
Hot Rise is a band that's been together an awful long time, and they're pretty democratic. Becky Buller is the band leader, but yet she does really value input from everybody. There are others I've worked with that are very dictatorial about what they want. And there's no wiggle room. And the nice thing about that is you don't have to worry.
You don't have to think. Yeah.
Do what they say, and you show up and do what they say, and that's your job. Some people don't like that because it feels too restrictive. There have been times where somebody has hired me to play a certain way, and I really wasn't the person for the job. And that's tricky if somebody expects you to be someone that you're not musically. Some people can chameleon into it and out better, but I'm not going to hire Wes to play like Jimmy Rogers, I don't think. If I want somebody who does Jimmy Rogers, I might call Chris Trulson or somebody else. Or if I want, a high singer, I've got to find somebody with a high voice. But as far as the Democratic versus I think logistically and from a business standpoint, the band leader is a better business model. And a lot of these democratic bands started as democratic, eventually ended up with whoever was the last person standing ended up being the sole proprietor. Pretty sure Lonesome River Band.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, Sammy is now the leader of that band. Russell Moore with Third Time Out. So it really gets complicated from a business standpoint when you're talking about having assets. If there's a sound system that costs, $40,000 and who owns it and one person leaves, well, then somebody else is stuck with it. And when you have democratic bands, that's tricky. Or how you divide up the sales and who does taxes at the end of the year. Yeah, it can be better. It can be easier if one person is in charge of all that.
Yeah. Well, that's wise. It's good. I guess it kind of pulls the curtain back on some of the intricacies of band dynamics. Because I haven't thought about it like that before. But no, that's good.
Well, it can be done various ways, though. Sometimes what can happen is if it's a democratic band, people will gravitate towards what they're good at and away from what they're not so good at. But in those instances, there's also the risk that one person ends up doing a lot of work for the band and the other members don't have to do as much, yet they're still as invested from a standpoint. So they're still getting all of the same cut, but there's one person doing the heavy lift. And you could see where that could wear somebody out.
Yeah, I think that works for a little while, but then after a year and a half, it's kind of like somebody's going to get tired of pulling that weight and you end up with some strife.
You could.
Definitely. Well, Dan, what's new and big and upcoming this year for you wrapping up the fall here?
Well, we just released back in the spring Seesaw from the ETSU Bluegrass Pride Band, and that was on the charts, the Bluegrass Today charts a few times.
Nice.
In the top 20. I also produced an album and a few singles are out from the Burnett Sisters Band. And currently, I don't know when this will air, but currently one of their songs that Ani Burnett wrote right here in my office as part of her voice lesson. That song is currently number 1 2 weeks in a row on the
That's
Bluegrass Today
awesome.
Brassicana chart, and it was like the first song that she ever finished.
Well,
So that's pretty cool. So they're up for IBMA Momentum Band of the Year. I'm really proud of what they're doing. I get to see them all the time. They're up here, and Nisa works here in
mhm,
Frosty's old job, the PR and marketing position.
yeah,
The Pride Band, we're going to be all over the country playing at festivals. We'll be up at the Darrington, Washington Festival, though up in Washington State. We'll be down. I think we're doing another Danny Stewart cruise out of Florida. We'll be at the Withlacoochee Bluegrass Festival this November. We'll be at the what's the one out in Arizona? Danny's festival out there where the London Bridge is. I forget the name of that one, right? I've been there, played there.
yeah.
The Pride Band is getting booked thanks to Laura Maynor, one of our alumna. She books the band at some of the bigger festivals.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my colleagues here, they're all into all kinds of good work. Nate Olson is our academic director, Roy Andrade directing old time music, Lee Bidgood with the Institute for Appalachian Music and Culture. We're in the Department of Appalachian Studies. Kalia Yeagle is helping out in full-time capacity as a lecturer for old-time music. And we've got Missy Raines here this year as our artist in residence.
Nice.
Tim Stafford was our artist in residence for 2 years. Before that, we had Mike Compton, Brittany Haas. And so Missy, she's getting a Distinguished Achievement Award from the IBMA this year. And at the same time, she's our artist in residence. So there's a lot of good stuff happening,
Yeah.
like right
Wow.
here in this building.
So cool. Yeah.
Very,
Well, listen,
very
if you need
impressive.
if you need a guy to sell merch on that Danny Stewart cruise coming up, you know where to find me.
Sounds like Wes will drive the van to get
I
y'all
will
down to
definitely
Florida.
drive the van. Yep, for
I
sure.
would just about let you. And I know you've folded a lot of T-shirts that we put on the table before. So
Yep, I think I can remember how to fold a T-shirt. I'm not sure. My wife says that I don't, but I'm pretty sure that I do. I think so.
well, if you want to stay married, folding a T-shirt, that's the least you can do.
And
Mm.
probably not going on a Danny Stewart bluegrass cruise.
Well, you both
So-
could go.
We could.
I'll be
yeah,
there.
Yeah. Me and Avery will go, and we'll do a live podcast from the Danny Stewart
Yeah.
bluegrass cruise.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Live podcast.
Yeah, let's
from
lock
Danny
that
Stewart
in,
Cruise.
Danny Stewart.
What kind of mic are you using, Avery?
This is the SE 2300. I needed kind of just a good all around mic to have for some vocal stuff. I wanted a bigger sound on some of my acoustic things that I'm doing. And we did this the other day, and I had my iPod or my AirPods in, and I'd heard myself and didn't like the way it sounded. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to plug in the interface and do this. And it sounds good. I'm happy with it. It's
Cool.
nothing fancy, but I like the SE stuff. It doesn't really break the bank. I feel like you get a lot of bang for your buck. We were talking about ribbon microphones earlier. That I think the Voodoo VR2 is one that's kind of on my radar. I've almost pulled the trigger on it a few times, but I think buying some small diaphragm microphones matched pair would be a better investment for me.
I just love mics. I'm a microphone pig. I saw that there. I didn't recognize it. I couldn't tell if it was an SE or a Peluso. Peluso makes the P280 that looks a lot like that.
Yeah. A friend of mine had some SE mics that we used on a project, and I don't know. The microphone game, as you know, Dan, is deep and wide and is expensive. My goodness. You can
I
make some
know.
money disappear in a hurry.
When you get into the microphones that I like, it's like a lifelong investment.
Yeah. I see some of these and I'm like, I could pay on that for 10 years and not even own a third of it,
Yeah, Peluso, he recently just sold me a vintage U67. And I was using it last night on some guitar recordings. It and a KM84. Oh man, that's a great sounding microphone. There's so much to love about those.
Yeah. The Neumann sound it's very distinguishable when you hear it,
Yeah,
but
sounds like music.
yeah, how about that? It's always hard when you listen to comparisons. Before I buy a microphone, I'm always digging in on YouTube for a few hours, listening to comparison after comparison after comparison. And whenever the Neumann stuff comes up, I'm like, well, there's the standard. Now let me listen to everything else. It feels like to my little amateur ear, but
Well, there's every, sometimes, there are other tools. Like if I'm recording upright bass, sometimes I use an old Neumann mic on it, but sometimes that doesn't work for every
mm,
player and every instrument. Sometimes I do an omnidirectional Earthworks in a different
mm,
location, and that actually does better than
yeah,
Neumann will do. And so, it's good to have a handful of tools if you're engineering a lot. But
yeah,
as you were talking earlier about like bedroom recording and recording from home, if you've got a good 2-channel interface and a couple of good
mm,
microphones, you can do an awful lot.
an awful lot. When I not to make a long story short here, or short story long, when I wanted to do that project last fall, I kind of came to my wife and was like, all right, so I could spend money in the studio, or if you let me spend, a smaller amount, this won't be as good of product, but I'll learn along the way. I got the Apple, I love using Logic and the education bundle where you get Logic and I forget all those packages in there. But anyway, invested in that, an SSL interface, and then a few good microphones, and was able to kind of put together a product that I was proud of.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's
But
it's the way of the future. It's so expensive to rent a big studio, and a lot of the big studios, they're kind of going the way of the dodo anyway.
yeah,
And so, it's a different world, but people do expect recording still. People want to hear music.
hmm
They want to consume it
yeah,
on their devices, and
yes,
you want to give them the very best quality that you can.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, man, this has been a blast. Thank you for sharing your time. This has been a lot of fun. Well, I guess we'll see you on the cruise, and
Yeah.
we'll go
Well,
from
Yes.
there.
we got to get a
Yes.
bigger van this time, so we got to get one of those big vans.
Yes, a very, very big. Well,
Very big van.
y'all just gonna fly down and meet us there, I think, is how you're gonna do it.
We could do that. Yeah.
Bring your
So if you can swing by Texas and just pick me up, I'd appreciate it.
I'll
well,
meet you in
just fly
Charlotte.
fly straight to Orlando and just get on the boat. It'll be
Yeah.
no problem.
That'll be
All
fine.
right.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, thanks again. It's been a blast, and maybe we'll do this again sometime and pick some new topics.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you guys for inviting me, and I'm proud of what y'all are doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, thank you
Thank you.
so much. All right. Thank you, guys.